25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
What did we learn today? We learned that Miami might just be the only chance that the ACC has. We'll talk the Canes' domination over Florida, Clemson, Virginia Tech's depressing losses. We learned that Drew Aller looks reborn with Andy Kotelnicki calling plays for him up in Happy Valley. Is Penn State ready to be a championship contender? We'll talk about that. And we learned that Notre Dame is really stout defensively. And Drew, they might just cakewalk to the college football playoff. We welcome you in to another edition of the 3 Tech Pod, our week 1 live show. Glad to see folks streaming in, starting to fill up the chat room as well. We're glad to have you. If you are finding us for the first time, we are at 3 Tech Pod on all of our social media. We'd love to have you join. We do previews, recaps, all the good stuff. And tonight, we're joined by Drew Hull, a special guest, friend of the program. Drew, glad to have you on tonight.
Yeah, Mitch, it's good to be back. Joined a few times last year, but don't think I ever got to, get on and chat with you. And excited to talk about an exciting week 1. It's just great to have college football back. Big college football fan. Just having it back, having it on the TV, being able to tune into all these great games has been a lot of fun. So excited to talk it over.
Yeah, man. It's, I think I saw some banter over on Twitter. I actually saw one question asking if this was the most overhyped week 1 that we could remember. And I guess we'll get into that. I don't think that there were a ton of just outstanding games up and down the slate that in the way that they ended up being. Obviously, we just watched the end of Texas A&M Notre Dame a 10-point win there. It was a different kind of, I think, really good game. I mean, it was a rock fight. So if you enjoy rock fights and defense, you had a blast. If you like explosive offense, maybe you turn the channel to something else. But, I think that's something that we can get into as we talk through our big 3. We've got storylines from the weekend as well. But we did our 3 Tech Big 3 in the preview, as we always do. And we started with Georgia and Clemson. And Drew, my takeaway from number 1 Georgia absolutely dominating number 14 Clemson 34-3. Number 1 is that Georgia remains on another plane. They are just a tier above maybe everybody else in college football. But number 2, offense is so key in today's game. And if you do not have a quarterback that can throw the ball confidently down the field, you might be in a lot of trouble. We saw that with Cade Klubnik. We'll talk about it more with Texas A&M a little bit as well.
Yeah, no doubt. You talk about the, overhyped week number 1. I think we learned a lot from a lot of teams. I think that's kind of what week 1 is used for. I'm a Tennessee guy. Did we, get an exciting game between Tennessee and Chattanooga? Of course not, but we learned a lot about the kind of team Tennessee is going to be, the kind of plays that we're going to see called in the Joey Halsley offense. But talk about Georgia and Clemson. QB play is going to be massive. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in the game. We saw Shadur on Thursday, saw Cam Ward today in the swamp, and Carson Beck. I feel like every time I was, trying to flip back and forth, find all these different great games, every time I turned on this Georgia-Clemson game, he was making a great throw across the middle, making another great read. They were talking about his pocket presence and, his ability that we might see him make the jump to the next level. So having a guy like that who's just poised in the pocket, obviously he's got great options all over the field. At Georgia, a great play caller. And Coach Bobo, but a lot of things went his way today. But I feel like his ability, obviously, with Trevor Etienne out, his ability to step up through the passing game, really just dominate Clemson, especially in the second half, proves a lot about Georgia. And like you said, might just be on a whole nother planet.
And it was frustrating to see just how dominant Georgia was after those halftime adjustments. I mean, we all know that halftime adjustments are where elite football games are won and lost, right? And I think I just hoped that Clemson, after doing such a great job of holding Georgia down offensively, I mean, the Tigers defense really showed up. I saw that one article. I think it was from the Clemson Insider. The headline was that Clemson's defense failed to do its job today. And understandably so, all of the comments were like, did you watch the football game? Because,
Sure.
yes, 34 points, if you just look at a box score, does not look good. If you actually watch that game, though, Clemson gave up the majority of those points after the game was well and truly decided. It felt like everybody in orange quit at a certain point, and that's when Georgia really poured it on. For me, the issue was Cade Klubnik looked timid. We asked our biggest question about this game when we did the preview was, what will Cade Klubnik do? We tweeted out a video clip from that earlier today. Cade had to throw the ball down the field. He had to be confident using his legs, always giving Georgia something to think about instead of just dropping 7, dropping 8 into coverage. And that didn't happen today. Klubnik looked timid. He looked afraid to throw the ball down the field. And I think there's a lot of similarities, unfortunately, between the game that we just finished watching in College Station and the one in Atlanta, where I think the quarterback played very hesitantly, but I think there's another issue of maybe those wide receivers aren't as good as we thought they were going to be. In both instances, Drew, it looked like there wasn't a whole lot of separation from the defensive backs.
Yeah, and I mean, I watched obviously both those games. Just got through watching A&M Notre Dame, as you mentioned, but I watch a lot of high school football. I call high school football games every Friday, and you just watch sometimes quarterbacks who obviously are not mature. They're not college Division I quarterbacks, so they struggle to push the ball down the field. There's not a lot of down the field opportunities. You run the ball obviously a lot in high school football. There's a lot of swing passes, quick slants, whatever. And that's what it looked like, to be quite honest. You see Wiegman and Klubnik, the two quarterbacks you mentioned, just really struggle to get the ball pushed down the field. Again, could be lack of separation from some of these wide receivers. And it's a young room in Clemson, right? I mean, Dabo, not a guy who likes to use the portal. That's widely known across college football. But, I mean, you have true freshmen starting out wide for Clemson, and probably the best secondary, if not very, very close to it in Georgia. So it's going to be tough for Cade Klubnik if his receivers aren't able to get open. But again, very timid, not a lot of down the field action from Klubnik. And then you mentioned Wheaton. I mean, watching him all night, missed a few open throws. I mean, one of those was an interception right over the head of a wide open receiver. So it looks timid. It looks like even if you were to draw a play up down the field, they don't feel comfortable just laying something down the seam or throwing a hard out route past 5 to 10 yards. So definitely something to keep an eye out on. But especially in Clemson's case, I mean, it's just I'm not saying Cade Klubnik is elite, but you got a lot of young receivers out there who are trying to work on a Georgia defense that's probably the most stout in the country.
What did you like from Georgia offensively? It seemed like initially they really struggled to move the ball. Carson Beck's not going to light you up most weeks. It feels like he really is a system quarterback, but what he does well. He moves through his progressions. He's not afraid to check it down or throw to his hot route. I wonder if we saw kind of a practice almost out of Georgia where it felt like that first half, all right, work out the kinks. The second half, they really put that pedal down.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, no Trevor Etienne, obviously not a huge deal, but a guy who's been working out with them the entire summer, early into fall. I'm a big Branson Robinson guy. Me and my buddy who I do the podcast with, we've been on Branson Robinson since our national championship live stream for that Georgia TCU game. Unfortunately for TCU fans, they learned about him in that national title game. He was like third or fourth string running back who had checked in while they were up 60 or whatever. But he looked really good tonight. Again, he's a guy that, he's just a playmaker. He filled in well for Trevor Etienne. He'll continue to play, but obviously won't be the first team back. But you mentioned it. I mean, Beck's, just poised in the pocket, his ability to kind of run through progressions quickly. There's so many playmakers out there. I mean, third or fourth string receiver at times today seemed to be London Humphreys, and he was an all SEC freshman performer, right? I mean, he's an elite wide receiver who's really not even touching the ball that much just because of the star power on that Georgia offense. So Beck looked really good. He looked really mature, which is what you want. I mean, that's a second-year starter, senior QB in Carson Beck. So Beck really looked surprising. If you're able to pair the way that Beck looked in the second half specifically, with a run game of Trevor Etienne, you want to, Trevor Etienne, you want to mix in Branson. They get confusing, dude. They get confused. I just had my fantasy football draft too. I'm already thinking about Trevor Etienne. But Branson Robinson, ETN, you mix in that with, the veteranship of Carson Beck, it's going to be a really tough offense matched with the best defense in the country at this point.
Yeah, I think we got to see that Georgia, like I said, is a cut above just about everybody else. Last question here, and we'll move on to Miami and Florida. Who do you
Yeah.
ultimately blame this loss on for Clemson? Is this a loss in the moment? Is this a failure to prepare correctly on the team's part, or does this really rest at the feet of Dabo Swinney not building this team the way that everyone else is, fighting with one hand tied behind his back?
Yeah, I mean, I would consider myself someone who wants to preserve kind of the tradition, the pageantry, just the originality of college football. So I like Dabo Swinney as a person. I like his mindset. But at this particular point, you obviously won a few national championships through the 2010s. That's awesome. Now you kind of get into this new era where it seems like this is a good measuring stick. You play probably the best team in the country in Georgia, and you come up 31 points short, right? And I'm not saying it's a complete coaching booth in the moment by Dabo Swinney, but you have a quarterback who, in my opinion, is not somebody that can lead Clemson to the playoff. You have wide receivers out there who, if you would have hit the portal, would have been ready to play, but they're true freshmen who, although highly rated, just aren't quite ready to play. And so I think it's kind of just where Clemson stacks up in today's college football, right? There's just not a lot of opportunity for them. You're going to be playing experienced secondaries. I mean, you want to talk about Florida State, Miami, just guys who have been around. For Clemson, you got homegrown talent, you got great team chemistry. But unfortunately for Coach Swinney, that can only take you so far. So in my opinion, this is an overarching issue from Dabo Swinney. This just kind of seemed like the last opportunity for Clemson maybe this year, and kind of the experiment without using the portal for a few years, and it's not going well. So I think this is more of an overarching thing. If you're a Tigers fan, kind of unfortunate to hear, but you go against the number one team in the country, you get crushed. And I think that's just kind of where you are at a program, as a program right now.
I want to see how Garrett Riley makes some adjustments because, boy, his offense looked slow. It looked uninspired. It looked like he was babying his quarterback a little bit, which he may have to do. I don't know. I'm not there on the ground covering it every day. Klubnik certainly did not look comfortable, but something's not working offensively for Clemson. It was a struggle at times last year. It was obviously a struggle before Riley got there. That's why they brought him in from TCU.
Yep.
But something hasn't clicked there in Death Valley. So Clemson, certainly obviously not out of the race for the ACC. This is a non-conference game. It feels very much like it did for Oregon a couple of seasons ago when they got blasted by the Georgia Bulldogs and then ended up being a pretty good team, right, under Dan Lanning. So
Sure.
I think the symmetry is there for sure. But boy, Clemson has a long way to go if they want to compete at the top of the table like they have in years past. It certainly feels like maybe a closing of the book on Clemson's championship run, which is concerning to Tiger fans. I know that's for sure.
Sure.
Let's talk about the just beat down that happened in the Swamp. I picked Florida to win this game outright. They were plus 2.5 coming in. And number 19, Miami said, no, we're not playing around with that. 41-17. Drew, we asked at the preview, who wins the battle up front? Is Miami ready for the spotlight and the expectations? Boy, were they ever. This game was close for a little bit. Florida obviously scored a touchdown, a 70-yard touchdown from Montrell Johnson to bring it, I believe it was 17-10 at that point, right before the half. Miami drives the field, scores again, 24-10, just like that. The Gators are out of it. Florida looked like they were playing up a level. They looked like they were a group of 5 team trying to contend with a Georgia, right? A real contender at the national championship level. Let's start here with Billy Napier. What did you see from the Gators, and how many more games does Billy Napier stay the head coach at Florida? Because, boy, it feels like his days are numbered.
Yeah, this is a feeling that as a Tennessee fan, I can relate to. It's like 2018, 2019. You got Jeremy Pruitt walking up and down the sideline. In that moment, you know it's bad, but you don't really realize how bad it is until the next guy comes and kind of saves you, right? Until Josh Heupel came, you don't really realize what Tennessee is able to do. when you talk about Florida, this is a team that was competing for national titles. They were in the SEC championship like 5 or 6 years ago, right? This is a huge brand in college football. And I think Florida fans, although they are calling for the firing of Billy Napier, have kind of lost sight. Like you are one of the best teams in college football year in and year out with a good coach. You know what I'm saying? Kind of the same thing with Texas A&M, where Jimbo Fisher came in and had all these resources and just, completely threw it away, And so you talk about Billy Napier, Montreal Johnson, great player. You bring in these 5-star guys out wide, including Andy Jean, some of these great players, and they're just completely misused. It's not like Florida is not a talented team. It makes it worse for them that their schedule is absolutely brutal. And I don't think Billy Napier is going to make it too many more games. I mean, UCF looks like they're going to blow this team outright, not even close,
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be a bad year if this is what it looks like. Questions have been floating around, like, is this Miami being good? Is this Florida being bad? I was texting with Ben, my buddy from my podcast. Like, it can be a little bit of both. I think Miami's in a great position, but to stick on Florida, I mean, they're not in a good spot. In my opinion, not a great way to start the season. Not a great look from Billy Napier. And, when you have a team with enough talent to win 6-7 games, even on this tough schedule, and, you go out there and lose by 30 at home, not a great look.
Maybe the worst look of the entire afternoon. There's a screenshot floating around on Twitter where Florida Gator recruits, guys that the Gators have brought in for an official visit wearing Gator merch, are actively cheering for Miami. You can see it behind the shot. I think, I don't remember if Florida had just turned it over, if Cam Ward had just made a big play, but you see these high school recruits cheering for Miami. That, I don't know. I don't know if that's rock bottom for Florida. It feels like it, getting thumped by 30 by your in-state rival, because like I led this off with, it not only feels like you were the secondary team here, it feels like you're miles away from even being able to compete with a Miami team. I mean, it's unfortunate that the story here, I think, is that the Gators are absolutely terrible. They're probably going to get dog walked through this schedule, the hardest schedule in college football history, potentially. Really, while the headline should be, hey, you know what? The U might be back. Cam Ward, we asked, and Trey talked about this in the preview show. Typically, there's a learning curve, right? When you bounce conferences, when you go up a level. Cam Ward had that learning curve when he went up from Incarnate Word to Washington State. We expected that maybe there was going to be that learning curve when he faced, a top 25 defense, potentially, right? They had the talent to be that, and the Florida Gators on the road, in prime time, in the swamp, in the heat. And he looked like he was out for a stroll in the park. His nonchalant manner, I think, calmed his team down. And aside from one interception, he really could do no wrong.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Cam Ward is a guy with just an unbelievable amount of talent. Obviously, the guys around him, you talk about Xavier Restrepo, Damian Martinez, like, he's got the playmakers. I think the talent has never been the question, in Miami. It's always been, can the coach, whoever it is, and at this point it's Mario Cristobal, allow this team to be as good as they are on paper? Cam Ward is an excellent quarterback. People are hesitant to pick Miami because you pick Miami every year because they've got a great team, great NIL funding, great recruiting and transfer portal class, and then they come in and the on-field management is piss poor. Tonight, it looked like a completely different story. You mentioned how bad Florida looks. That's one in its own, but Miami looked great. Cam Ward, a guy who, with tonight's performance, is just kind of catapulted himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the country. People might have believed it, but now it's solidified. You got to start looking at him as a guy who is a dark horse Heisman guy, a guy that is really going to come out and ball. And if he's playing like that every week, got Damian Martinez, as I mentioned, out of the backfield, and you hold a somewhat explosive and solid Florida offense to only 17, and really held him down in the second half completely. This Miami team looks really good. And again, it's week one. Hard to learn about what Miami is just because you don't know how bad Florida is quite yet. But either way, I mean, that's a Power 5 opponent, one of the toughest places to play, and you blew them out. And that's a huge statement for Miami, huge statement for Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal especially.
Yeah, Florida was not good last year, but they averaged only 17 points given up at home. They had that big win over Tennessee. despite a lot of those wins and that production coming against lesser opponents, I still wanted to believe that there was some magic to the swamp, right? That you wouldn't just let your in-state rival, a team that you have had all off season to prepare for, come in and beat you in front of 100,000 fans, whatever the swamp holds.
Yeah.
And yet they didn't even look competitive. Matt Berry for ESPN put out an awesome tweet that Dan Mullen ended up retweeting.
Oh, the retweet.
You might have seen it.
Yep.
Matt Berry said that you realize they fired the previous head coach at Florida after 3 straight New Year's Six Bowl appearances and then let him go in that 4th season. Now, Dan Mullen had kind of quit on the job, but that was the success that Mullen had attained for Florida. They were used to competing for championships, being right there, like you said.
Sure.
And now Billy Napier, I believe, is 11-15 in his tenure at Florida. Yes, he's had a ton of recruiting success, but he might be the most criminal mismanager of talent potentially in the country because, like you said, there are 5 stars around this field that either you're not even seeing or you're not seeing make an impact because they're not put in the position to succeed. We did see DJ Lagway get to play quarterback after Graham Mertz got the lights knocked out of him. But boy, man, I don't know if DJ Lagway takes the lumps the rest of the season this year and then everybody exits via the portal, Napier's gone. I mean, it could be a wholesale staff change in Gainesville.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I talked about the mismanagement there. I think the sheer player development, it's got to start there. Montrell Johnson comes from Louisiana, great running back. Has he elevated his game while moving from the Group 5 level to, 5th, 6th, 7th round pick up to one of the best backs in the country? Not really, because Etienne was in the backfield with him. This year, he might be a pretty good running back, but now you're trying to use Graham Mertz in a way that, in my opinion, is going to kind of step the bounds of what Graham Mertz can do. Graham Mertz really hasn't gotten any better. And this is a team that likes to use the portal, and understandably so. You're in the SEC, you got to get play now talent. Graham Mertz is not a quarterback who you're going to win 8 or 9 games with. It's completely understandable to want to hold over until the next guy when DJ Lagway comes in. That's understandable. Sometimes you got to do that. Joe Milton started last year for Tennessee. Is he a playoff level quarterback? Of course not. But you want to get until Nico Imaliava. For Graham Mertz, it seems like he's their guy, right? And under Dan Mullen, you had the development of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Trask comes out of there as, a really, really good quarterback who could at least, will Florida to 8 or 9 wins and look competitive against good defenses. Now you're in a position where you took Graham Mertz at the point he came to Florida, kind of damaged goods from Wisconsin. A lot of question marks coming in. You mentioned the mismanagement. And again, I'll end on that. Billy Napier's got to go. The athletic department over there has got to make an effort to say, look, we're going to get smoked running through this schedule. Billy's probably going to be out by the end of the year. You might as well nip it in the bud early and let the interim coach kind of take it on the chin and say, look, we fired our coach. We end up going 3-9, whatever. If you let Billy Napier ride out through that 3-9, it's going to get real toxic real quick in Gainesville. You throw in an interim coach, you try and make some changes heading into the next season in 2025, equally tough schedule, but it's a new sheriff in town, a little bit more forgiving if you're some Florida fans. But yeah, they're going to get dragged through 2024. So I suggest making a change early.
I think Miami is a very, very good team based off of week 1. Again, it's week 1. You try not to put together takes that you might regret in December. This is a vacuum for most teams who obviously this is their first time taking the field. But boy, hard to find a positive spin out of the Gators camp. Hard to find a negative spin out of the Hurricanes camp after what we saw Cam Ward do this afternoon. Well, now we're going to bring in Trey Reeves has just called in from College Station, Texas. And
Trey, how we doing?
What's up, man?
What's up?
We moved to our final Big 3 game. Notre Dame 23, Texas A&M 13. Trey, you were in attendance for this game. We'll talk about the game in just a second, but first, talk about the environment. It looked like it was an electric atmosphere. Truly an awesome entrance. They bring power back. What was it like being there?
Yeah, I mean, it was everything you want in a big-time college football environment. Packed house, 4th largest crowd in Kyle Field history with just over 107,000 people. Notre Dame brought a lot of fans down from South Bend. They were very vocal, very enthusiastic in their big moments as well. Very courteous to each other. So just an all around great environment. Can't ask for more, man. There's just a buzz in the air the whole time. Close game, back and forth battle of two really solid teams, two really solid defenses, especially. And that really got the crowd going at moments.
Yeah, it looked really cool watching it on TV. Unfortunately, for Texas A&M fans, the offense couldn't do anything. And Trey, as you remember in our preview, the big question that we asked, what will Texas A&M's offense look like under Colin Klein, Connor Wegman, healthy? I think, to put it bluntly, it didn't look very good.
Yeah, they looked like an offense that was in game one running a new scheme. Quite simply, they were out of sorts a little bit. They didn't take any delay of game penalties that I'm aware of, except maybe one right there at the end. I think as after the game was kind of already in doubt. So that was a big improvement over what we've seen the last 4, 5, 6 years in College Station. But yeah, they just really looked like an offense that was struggling to find their footing, struggling to find consistency, and still hadn't worked out roles for all of the skill players on the offense. There were times that Garrett, our co-host, was there with me at the game as well, and we were just asking, why, it's 3rd and 8. Do we need Le'Veon Moss on this situation? Is this more of an Amari Daniels or EJ Smith role? You got Moose Muhammad didn't see the field until the second half, so just really interesting situations. I think they're getting some kinks worked out and walking away. The optimistic fan in me wants to say, hey, maybe if the McNeese game and the Notre Dame game were switched and they got to work out in some live game reps before playing an elite defense in Notre Dame, maybe they get some more kinks worked out, right? Maybe they're moving the ball a little bit more consistently. It looked like they had found something there late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter. The offensive line was opening some holes. Le'Veon Moss had some big runs, culminating in the only touchdown drive of the night, but it was just not enough and a little too late to get the momentum going. And they couldn't really sustain it other than that one drive.
Yeah. Drew, I mean, gosh, watching from home on my TV, it looked like we were just talking about Cade Klubnik being slow, being timid. It looked like Connor Wegman was really gun shy despite his entire career with A&M, him being a little bit of a gunslinger. I mean, he'd only thrown 2 interceptions coming into this game. He throws 2 really bad ones in the first half against Notre Dame. I honestly didn't think that the offensive line played all that poorly for the Aggies, but maybe I'm biased. What were you seeing as just a third-party observer?
Yeah, and I mean, it was obviously awesome, Trey, that you got to be there. I was just telling Mitch, jealous I didn't get to go. That's a bucket list spot for me. But yeah, I agree.
We got to stay if you ever come down. We got you.
Okay, all right, yeah, hey, that sounds good. I need to get down there. I'll be in Norman. First time I'll be in Oklahoma for the Tennessee-Oklahoma game, but I'll be in Dallas, flying into Dallas. So I'm excited. I like Texas a lot. But to get back to Connor Wegman, yeah, I agree. We talked about it just a little bit. Gun-shy is a great way to put it there, Mitch. I mean, he's a great player. He's a raw talent. He shows flash of being able to get out of the pocket and make something happen. But just really, stagnant offense all night from A&M. You mentioned it, Trey, a great, 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter kind of drive from them. Maybe thought, they come back or they take the lead at some point, and they just couldn't really get it going. But bright spot for me is really just, in my opinion, it's Mike Elko. I know the game didn't go to plan. I know it was a 23-13 loss at home. You don't want to lose your home opener, especially against a top 10 team like Notre Dame, where the game was in your hands. But Elko seemed fired up on the sideline. He seemed like he wanted to be there. There were penalties that were called against A&M that he didn't like. He was up in the referee's face. Something that if as an A&M fan, I would feel like I missed with Jimbo Fisher. Maybe he's cool, calm, and collected down there, but Elko seems fired up, seems like he wants to be there. It might be a little bit before the offense, kind of starts firing on all cylinders, but McNeese, a good gear-up game. In my opinion, though, Elko seems like the perfect guy in College Station, just kind of got to get right. But he looked fired up and looked excited, at least, to be in College Station and be getting things going. So he looked fired up, looked good.
Yeah, I mean, just to your point, Drew, he's brought back several fan interaction traditions that are just huge olive branches to the fan base, right? Like that's a fan base that's been burned the last few years. And they brought out the core seniors are now out on the field to let the team run through them to start the second half. That's a tradition that's been gone for like decades at this point.
Sure.
He brought it back, and he's extending that olive branch. Definitely felt that in the stadium too. You could feel that there was just like a collective sigh of relief and not as much just gnashing of teeth as that close game kind of ticked away. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more optimism. I think going forward, I'd love to see a good proof of concept in 2 weeks at Florida. That's the big benchmark for me.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna have no problems with McNeese next week, obviously, but let's see the offense after they've had a tune-up game. Let's reserve judgment for a couple of weeks and see where we're at. Because if you're going just off of tonight, it's going to be a long season. But I think they'll improve. I think you'll see a little bit more proof of concept when they go to Gainesville in a couple of weeks.
I want to talk a little bit more about A&M and what we saw both on both sides of the ball. But Notre Dame won this game, and they really sealed this late. It felt like the defense found something late. Obviously, they were able to key in on the run because the Aggies weren't throwing the ball down the field. Connor Wegman ends 12 of 30 for 100 yards and 2 picks. So certainly not testing those defensive backs. Riley Leonard didn't do a ton through the air either, 158 yards. But boy, on the ground, once they felt like they got that rhythm, that offensive line seemed like they found a second wind late that might have been the difference.
Yeah, they found that QB power play that they kept running to their sideline. It seemed like every single time. And it was effective for him, man. It was student body left, or student body right, and Riley Leonard follows the blocks as they developed, and he was very patient and did exactly what he needed to do. He was the Notre Dame team I was so impressed with their poise. We were sitting right behind their sideline. I'm not lying when I tell you guys, I didn't see a single golden helmet turn around and look up at the student section the entire game. They were locked in on the game. They had one false start penalty the entire night. It was a team that was locked in and just had a championship mindset coming into that stadium tonight. Like it would have been really easy. So much was made about the freshmen on the offensive line, how are they going to handle 110,000 people screaming at them? Test passed. Like they passed it with flying colors. No sacks allowed. There were some pressures, obviously. They got to Riley Leonard a couple of times, forced some bad throws. But overall, I was really impressed with how that offensive line held up over a relentless attack. And just really impressed with their poise because they were locked in the entire time. When they had that 3 and out after Texas A&M tied, it would have been really easy for them to pack it up and say, well, not our night. Like this is a tough atmosphere. The place is rocking. We're just going to kind of fold over and A&M's going to go down and kick a field goal or score a touchdown and win. They didn't do that. They dug deep on the defensive side of the ball. I think they allowed 7 yards after that scoring touchdown, that touchdown drive the rest of the game until garbage time. So it was an impressive effort. I was impressed with the poise, and just hats off to Marcus Freeman for having them ready to play and get up for that big game, because quite frankly, that's not something we've known for Notre Dame for quite some time. That much was made about their record on the road. Much was made about their record when they go down south. Yep. And he put a lot of those narratives to rest. They looked like a team that has big goals in mind this year.
Yeah, I think it was Tyler Horka of Blue and Gold Illustrated who all week was saying, this is a game that Marcus Freeman needs. This is a legacy game. This is a definition of what the program can do. They don't have it. Marcus Freeman doesn't have that win, doesn't have that signature calling card. Can he get it? He got it tonight. And I think his team rallied around him to help get that. I haven't seen any of the press conferences afterwards. I've just seen some clippings on Twitter. Looked like some of the players in front of microphones were saying, yeah, we did this. We prepared to block out the hype, to embrace the hype, and then go to work. We talked about the adjustments, Drew, at the half with Georgia and Clemson. I don't know that A&M failed to adjust necessarily, but it looked like Notre Dame's adjustments were a little bit more effective, especially given the offensive side of the ball where they found something that was working. The Aggies did not.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it coming into the week. on my show, like we were picking week 1 games, and I said this Texas A&M team is going to be a lot different than what we've seen in the past. Obviously, a coaching change. Elko's a guy who likes to get gritty. It's going to get nasty, and he's going to win by whatever standards he's got to win by. We saw it at Duke. I feel like these past couple of years at A&M. Jimbo Fisher brings in all these 5-stars, tries and get spread it out, get rah like he's Alabama or Georgia instead of just playing A&M football. Mike Elko did a good job of that tonight, but Notre Dame did too. I mean, you mentioned it. Riley Leonard, a guy who's not going to light up the stat sheet throwing the football, but he's a gritty runner. He doesn't go down. I was watching Garrett Green for West Virginia, kind of the same thing. Like those guys run hard. They don't go down. They're able to be senior leaders for their teams. And you mentioned it. I mean, just lack of adjustments for A&M kind of got to him. You talked about the quarterback power tray that Riley Leonard kind of just abused down the stretch, and they weren't really able to stop it. So Notre Dame, I knew it was going to be a gritty fight. It was both teams are relentless. Neither team was going to go down. We saw it was knotted up at 6 points each going into halftime, and it was a gritty game. And it's a new era for A&M, so it doesn't surprise me that guys who have been on the roster for a while aren't able to adjust right off the bat. It's week 1 against a playoff contender Notre Dame, but you set a good foundation of what this team is going to look like. Obviously, you want the offense to come out firing and look a little bit better, but a lot of positive points when it comes to just, being gritty. It was a tough game to watch at times, felt like it dragged on, but, at the end of the day, that's a fun game of football. It was in the trenches all night. It was a clean game. You mentioned the lack of penalties and just a gritty game from both teams that Notre Dame's just more experienced being gritty, right? That's what they do. Texas A&M kind of hopping on that train. I think it could bring them some success down the stretch.
Yeah, Aggies need to get back on that grit train. And I mean, it's literally painted on the field now, right? Grind 100%. Is the motto of this Elko tenure in College Station. I think it will come. Trey, I know we have some angry Aggies in our chat right now. To give them a moment of catharsis, we'll end it on this. What did you see that frustrated you the most from Texas A&M? Because, I mean, you and I were texting most of this game. This felt extremely winnable. For everything that Notre Dame did right, it felt like Texas A&M tripped on their own feet a good number of times, whether it be the third down penalties, which when there was a penalty flag thrown, gosh, it was on a third down for Texas A&M, the lack of motion, the lack of creativity, the lack of execution from Connor Wegman. What do you kind of hang your hat on and say this has to get better if we're going to beat Florida in the swamp in week 3?
Man, it's hard to pin it on one thing because I do think there's a lot of work to do on the offensive side of the ball. That's the low-hanging fruit. No one really rose to the occasion. I think that's the concerning thing. Who are the guys that are going to step up and make the tough catch in traffic on third down and keep a drive going, right? You mentioned the penalties. Like, there was a drive in the first half. There were at least 3, maybe 4 drives that were stalled, promising drives that were stalled with a penalty or a turnover. Connor Wegman has him driving right before the half, throws an interception, almost gives Notre Dame a 2-for-1 opportunity. Defense bails him out. That's fine. But like, you were driving, you could have been up at halftime rather than tied. And that does wonders for momentum. You're driving in the first quarter and your outside wide receiver on a quarterback sneak false starts. There's no need for him to move, let alone move early. Right. So who's going to be the guy that steps up and says, you know what? I'm Connor Wegman's number 1 guy on third down. I am the safety blanket. I am the guy that you can rely on to move the chains. There doesn't seem to be that guy right now. And like I said earlier, like, my main thing, this is what we were saying leaving the stadium. Maybe this is a different outcome if they have a couple of tune-up games before Notre Dame to work out those kinks. They're trying to work out the kinks against the best secondary in college football. Like, I think you're going to see at least 2 of those guys in that defensive backfield go on the first day of the NFL draft come April. So I'm upset. Like, A&M fans, I'm right there with you. Like, ring wearing Aggie, I'm right there with you. Like, we need to start winning these games, but give Elko time. I think by the end of the year, you're going to have that chemistry developed. You're going to have that scheme fully integrated, and hopefully that swings some of these close games for once.
Texas A&M, I haven't fact-checked this, but I saw this because when A&M loses, everyone races to Twitter to pile on, of course. I saw that Texas A&M is 1-9 when they host College Game Day. I don't know if that's true
That's
or
true.
not, but
Yeah, it was 1-8 going into this one.
yeah,
So
I was gonna say certainly feels like, and it's been a lot of really close
it's
games.
been a ton of close games. Like you can go like the Clemson game in 2018 was a 2-point loss, I believe, and there's a controversy at the pylon in that one. Tennessee, it was a double overtime win. That's the one win in 2016. Florida, Johnny Manziel's first game in 2012 was a 3-point loss. Like I can just list off painful game day loss after game day loss, but I'll stop at that one.
Hey, that kid hit the kick. He hit a kick for like $50,000.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's a true freshman.
With Shane Gillis just giving him hell, like right in his face.
Ruthless from Shane Gillis, for sure.
Well, Trey, certainly won't fault you if you want to bow out. I know your voice has got to hurt. You want to stay on, or
I'll do a couple more. We'll see what's next on the run sheet. What we got?
Penn State, West Virginia.
I have some thoughts on Penn State, West Virginia.
Perfect. Well, we'll kick it to you first then. Boy, Drew Aller looked comfy in that Andy Kotelnicki system. Is this a rebirth of Drew Aller post kind of like savior of the program season that was supposed to be 2023, or is this just kind of getting lucky?
I mean, it's a rebuilt secondary for West Virginia, so we need to tap the brakes on any off the rails hype train. But man,
they look terrible. Yeah,
they were lost quite a bit out there, and I'm really struggling to tap the brakes on the Penn State hype. This was maybe one of the 2 or 3, maybe 2 games that you could circle on their schedule that's losable. Yeah. The hype is off the train. I'm buying the post-hype sleeper hype for Drew Aller at this point. That drive, that 20-second touchdown drive right before the half was exactly what Penn State fans have been waiting to see. 2 big-time throws. He underthrew the first one a little bit, but he put his receiver in the position to make a play or get a pass interference call. And then the touchdown pass was just an absolute dart and a great play by the receiver. He put it right where his receiver only the receiver could get it. Trey Wallace was the guy that got that one. And man, I think they would have put on an absolute offensive show if it weren't for that delay. I think that delay kind of like threw off the momentum a little bit. I think it ended up being like over 2 hours in the lightning delay.
Yeah.
I think they might have flirted with 40 or 50 points if they didn't have that delay to kind of throw off the momentum. So I'm hyped about Penn State at this point. It was a great performance. Really has me excited about what they can do in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Drew, as a fan of a team who has a young quarterback who's come in and taken over, and we'll talk about Tennessee in a moment, but
sure.
What did you see from Aller, and what did you see from Penn State as a whole that, maybe you think, okay, maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year that they get to 11 wins and get into the playoff and make a run.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Drew Aller, kind of a tough start to the game. I mean, it was just a nasty start in general. You had those back-to-back fumbles from both teams that, they're unable to recover. Penn State, that is. But, yeah, Penn State, they're a team that you kind of mentioned. They've been unable to get over that hump, beat the, top-tier Big Ten teams that they've needed to beat, to go to the postseason and really compete. For them, though, they have a 12-team playoff now to rely on. I think, 10-2, if that's the record that you're going to be sitting at. There's a good chance you make the 12-team playoff. But outside of that, it's not too tough of a schedule. Obviously, Ohio State on the schedule, but I mean, other than that, UCLA's on there. They looked horrible today. USC, on the road is a tough game, but we'll see how they look tomorrow. And I mean, I guess maybe Washington, but Penn State, very favorable schedule. West Virginia was a game at the top where I like West Virginia a lot. Coming in, and maybe that's a game that they drop, but they find a way to win that game. They looked really good on offense, which kind of surprised me. And Drew Aller looked good as well. So if he continues to find a stride, it's not going to be a lot of defenses pushing him to his limits. I mean, the upcoming weeks, you got Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, and UCLA. I think if there's a time for Drew Aller to show how good he is, it's in these upcoming weeks against some of the worst teams in the conference and literally the worst team in college football last year. So he's got his opportunity right in front of him. The schedule is there. The playoff push for James Franklin is certainly there. I would love to see a home playoff game for Penn State. I think that would be awesome. And I like Drew Aller. I feel like he's a guy who gets overhated a significant amount, and glad he, kind of got that out of the way, which is a good game.
Yeah, Nick Singleton had a good game. Penn State's defense was as advertised. I
The
mean, that
defense
that
was
doesn't
absolutely
really,
nasty. The
yeah,
defense
that
was
doesn't
nasty.
change. Abdul Carter leading that group. I mean, they're disgusting, fast, physical. They had West Virginia not. We kind of joked about Garrett Green being anointed as the top returning quarterback according to Pro Football Focus. I don't know where they got their numbers from, but he did not look good today. Trey, last question here on this game. Did this persuade you that West Virginia can't hang in the Big 12, or are you not falling prey to the week 1 vacuum syndrome and just saying, you know what, really bad test result, go even it out next week?
I mean, yeah, it's week 1. Don't overreact. You're never going to be as bad as week 1 or as high as week 1, right? So
Unless you're Florida.
Unless you're Florida. Yeah, I'm really happy I'm not a Florida Gator fan tonight. Yeah, I mean, they lost to Penn State last year in a late cover. It was a little bit more competitive of a game, and then they went on to win 8 games in the Big 12. So I don't see any reason why they can't compete in the Big 12. It's a step up in talent that they're facing when they face Penn State. So, yeah, the season's not over by any stretch of the imagination. They're going to have more success moving the ball against non-elite of the elite defenses.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I am concerned about that defense. A couple years ago, we caught flack from Mountaineer fans for questioning the defense. They one year were as advertised, not very good. The next year they were a lot better. This year, early test result, not very good. We're going to have to make that up, maybe with some extra credit down the stretch. Team that gets all the extra credit in the world because nobody had them pulling off this win other than Lee Corso, who somehow batted 1,000 on his picks today. Vanderbilt 34, Virginia Tech 27 in overtime. Gentlemen, I nearly had Virginia Tech in my ACC championship game. Boy, I'm feeling really good about not going that direction because the Commodores and Diego Pavia, they're riding, baby. We got the triple option magic going. Trey, you were just having a ball getting to watch that on TV. Pavia was spinning it. He was pitching it. He was running. Virginia Tech had no answer.
I discovered that Pavia autocorrects to all caps for some reason on my phone, and I love it. It's probably from the Auburn game last year when he was at New Mexico State.
Yeah.
Man, that's a fun attack. I don't know how many games they're going to win in the SEC, but I love it. I love that there's something different there now, and they're not just trying to do the same old, and Clark Lee's trying to evolve a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know how many games they're going to win, but they're going to be a fun watch on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, definitely came out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, I had them getting housed in this one. I think I 20-point win for Virginia Tech, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it was my Ben from the other podcast had them winning the ACC. Not looking too good, right? Not looking too good. This is a team that started slow last year. That's understandable, but you bring back literally 22 starters from your team last year to lose to arguably one of the worst Power 4 teams in the country. Not a great look. I know Vanderbilt's improved. They've brought in a whole new roster at this point, and maybe they're a real deal and can fight for bowl contention. But, yeah, Virginia Tech looked very stagnant on offense. Kyron Drones kind of got unlucky through an interception that was tipped by a D lineman, caught by a D lineman. Things like that just seemed to just happen all night. It was just one of those games that if you're a Virginia Tech fan, nothing can really go your way. Drones goes down near the end of the game. Colin Schleif launches one out of bounds to end the game. So just a rough game from the Hokies all night, a team that I was pretty high on. I still had Miami winning the ACC, but Virginia Tech, a team I was high on. You return all those good players, and Kyron Drones, a guy I believed could have been, selected in the upcoming draft near the top 3-4 rounds. So, yeah, it did not look good. Again, though, Clark Lee, like you mentioned there, Trey, just trying to evolve, trying to do something different than, the insanity route, which is just trying to do the same thing over and over. So a little bit of, evolving in Nashville and a good look from Vandy.
Mitch, let me ask you something real quick because you're kind of the president of the Virginia Tech Brent Pride fan club on our show. I brought up on our ACC preview that we might be a little more infatuated with the schedule than we are with the actual team.
Yes.
Thoughts after?
I think it's fair. I think it's fair. And I thought it was a fair concern at the time that charge that they made down the back half of the schedule. You pointed out in our ACC preview, not exactly against world beaters, right? A lot of low to mid tier conference opponents that they were taking out. At the same time, though, you have 95% of your offensive production back. The defense is something that Virginia Tech always hangs their hat on. And all offseason, they were saying the right things. Everyone was anointing them ACC champions, ACC dark horses. And I feel like, I certainly put them in that camp as contenders. But I do feel like it was well measured out. All of that went out the window in this first half when Vanderbilt was up 17-0. Drew, you mentioned the interception that Drones throws that doinks off a big man. But the game plan was terrible for the Hokies early. Their best wide receivers, Allie Jennings, an Old Dominion transfer from 2 seasons ago.
Yep.
He didn't get his first catch until the second half of the ball game. Even then, he only had 2 catches in the entire contest, 2 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown. If he's not at the center of your game plan, I don't know what we're doing. Kyron Drones is a mobile quarterback. I wanted to see him use his legs a little bit more. It felt like the Hokies were going east-west a lot of times, especially early, not north-south. And I think they felt like they were going to outspeed and out-juke Vanderbilt. And Trey, you texted at one point, like Vandy was not interested in missing a tackle.
Right. And it looked like Virginia Tech's whole offensive plan was predicated on Vandy missing a tackle. The number of times that it was 3rd and 7 and they came up 8 yards short was just astounding in the first half. Vandy was not interested in playing that game. They came out ready to play. They played disciplined football on the defensive side of the ball in the first half. They slipped a little bit in the second half because Kyron Jones is a good football player and a good quarterback, and he led the offense. They weren't going to keep him down forever. But yeah, that first half is why Vanderbilt won the game. Jumping out to that lead and playing disciplined football and not falling for the deception and missing tackles and playing right into Virginia Tech's hand.
And the last thing I got on Vanderbilt is this is definitely a step in the right direction for them. Obviously, I don't think this is a team, even though, in my opinion, this was probably one of the best games they'll play all season. You mentioned it, Trey. I literally did not miss a tackle. They were all over the field. Virginia Tech kind of played right into their hands. They're a brand new roster that nobody really knows about. Really tough to game plan against a triple option like that. Do I think they played a good game? Of course. They're not really going to be a team that I'm, scared of or really even think makes a bowl game this year. But it was a great win for them, and it shows that they're hungry, right? They wanted to come out and compete tonight. Tough team to scheme against. I think, like you mentioned, Mitch, that Virginia Tech just tried to out-talent them, and it didn't work. But as Vandy continues to play some of these top SEC opponents, I don't think it'll be as bad as in years past where they're just getting smacked without any comeback to it. I think they probably win 4 or 5 games against common belief from this preseason, but it's at least something for Vandy fans to believe in, because they looked good, and it looked like Clark Lee's made some adjustments with some New Mexico State help, I guess.
Yeah, it's that Jerry Kill, Diego Pavia magic.
Jerry,
it's some black magic that they have going on. I don't know what it is.
They brought green chilies from the homeland is what they did.
Yeah.
They added the spice. It was
Put them
funny
over everybody's locker. Just got the good.
Exactly. There was one point, I think I've forgotten. Maybe it was Roy Philpott said, Vandy students are still filing in, and this is like in the second quarter. He's like, I think a lot of them checked their phones and realized, wait, we're winning
the game. Yeah.
Get over there.
You can't blame them. You can't really blame them.
Oh, definitely not.
You certainly can't. I think, Drew, you make a good point. At the very least, it's a big win for Clark Lee, who, oh my gosh, he needed one in the worst way. It's one that shows that the program is headed in some kind of direction. Maybe we lose that plot halfway through the season when they've got 2 wins on the calendar. But it's good for Clark Lee. How hard he's working, how much effort he's putting into trying to rebuild that program. One of the most difficult rebuilds in the entire country. Just to see them get one is awesome. I wish it hadn't been at the expense of my T-shirt fandom of the Hokies, but it is what it is. A little frustrating.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Vandy, I think it just shows what kind of team we're talking about them on a week 1 recap with a lot of good games on the TV.
Right. Yeah.
If this is Vandy teams in years past, they get beat 42-10. Nobody hears about them at all. And we've spent probably 4 or 5 minutes talking about the right direction they're heading in. So again, you kind of hit it on the head. Vandy moving in a good direction. The black magic from Pavia and company pays off, and yeah, not a good look for the Hokies.
Well, Trey, we'll get you out of here on that. I know you've got to be exhausted after a long day of tailgating and watching some football. Appreciate you hopping on. I think Drew and I'll take it home from here.
Absolutely, guys. Enjoyed it. Y'all take it home, and can't wait to do it all again tomorrow for LSU USC.
That's right. We load right back up. All right, there he goes. Trey Reeves joining us from College Station. Drew, we've got our storyline roundup.
Let's do it
before we call it a night ourselves. First game that I had to put at the top of the run sheet here. Ashton Jonty, 6 touchdowns, 267 yards on just 20 carries in a 56-45 win over Georgia Southern. This game was a blast to watch in the afternoon window. Hopefully people realized that there was other football on when the Hurricanes were stomping the Gators. Did you get to watch any of this game?
I did. I saw a little bit of it. I think it was like Georgia Southern was either up or Boise State might have been up, but it was a really tight game. 2-point game, I think 38-36, something along those lines at some point. And I was like, oh yeah, I got to go tune into this game. I was just, kind of lazily watching Miami stomp Florida, as you mentioned there, but Boise State, a team with a lot of storylines coming into the season. Jonty, I would say not really toward the top of that list, although people knew he was a great player. And, he shows out that Boise State kind of runs away with it later in the game. And, Broncos pick up a big, big win. What seemed like maybe could be a disaster earlier in the game, and Boise State pulls away.
Yeah, I think you're right. The storyline with Boise was Maddox Madsen getting the starting job over Malachi Nelson at quarterback, and then whether or not they were going to cover, I think it was 13.5. Georgia Southern, to their credit, I mean, they were down early. To their credit, though, stormed back, took the lead, and then it was just a defense's optional fiesta through the second half, basically. But Jonty running away, it is a shame that he has no chance to win the Heisman because the voters probably won't even know who he is.
For sure.
Heisman's turned into a quarterback award, and a quarterback award that can be one of maybe 10 schools, it feels like, that wins it. So Jonty should get all the accolades for best running back, best overall player. I mean, this dude is built different. I think Boise State and Memphis they played Northern Alabama today, but the offense looked good. I think those are probably your cut above everybody else as far as G5 playoff contenders go.
Yeah, I mean, I would throw Liberty in there. Their schedule is consistently easy, and Caden Salter's a great player. But yeah, I mean, Madsen gets a start over Malachi Nelson. This was a really talented team. Chris Marshall comes over, former guy who was easily an SEC talent, faces trouble, goes JUCO, comes back to Boise State. All around. I mean, I think Jonty solidifies himself as a Doak Walker candidate. Ollie Gordon, obviously a great player, and Kinshawn Judkins kind of started slow today against Akron. So definitely something to keep an eye out on. And I think Jonty, 6 touchdowns. That's more than some starting split snap running backs will score all season. Unbelievable game from Jonty tonight. And Boise State kind of rolling. Maybe they made the right decision at QB.
Well, and shout out the freshman Sire Gaines. I don't know if anybody knows his name. 12 carries, $110, and a touchdown as well in his first career game. I mean, geez, the Broncos are going to run you over on the Smurf turf for the next 3 to 4 years. It's unreal.
Yeah.
J.C. French for Georgia Southern, have to give him props. 322 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns as well for the Eagles. Elsewhere, Texas dominates Colorado State 52-0. Arch Manning throws a touchdown pass. I refrained from tweeting that out because I figured every other red-blooded American was on their Twitter account.
Yeah, 100%.
Sending that out. Yeah, you knew exactly when it happened because I got 18 different versions of it in my Twitter feed. Yeah,
no doubt. I mean, Arch is, he's highly touted. I think, obviously, he's now the backup. Malik Murphy heads off to Duke. So, yeah, exactly what you want from a contender. Come out here, stomp the non-conference, kind of cupcake opponent, and keep it moving. So Texas does it at home, gets a job done. 52-0. Don't look back. You don't hear from a team like that in week 1. You've done your job, and you certainly didn't really hear much from Texas, except obviously that Arch Manning touchdown pass. So excited to see what Texas has got for them. Tough schedule they're faced with a few of the bigger SEC teams, but yeah, and Vanderbilt's on Texas schedule, so you never know.
That's right.
Yeah, Texas runs away with one, and yeah, they look good.
Their wide receivers are lightning fast. Defense looked pretty good. I'm excited to see them next week up in Ann Arbor when I think, well, at least somewhat of a real offense will challenge them. We'll talk about Michigan here in just a second. In Big Ten country, you have a horribly slow start for Ohio State. You mentioned that earlier. They did run away with it in the second half. My big note from this is Jeremiah Smith is next up at wide receiver U, catches 2 touchdown passes in his debut. Do you notice anything from this game? Are you concerned about Will Howard or the slow start from the running game, or just week one?
I think this is probably the most talented roster in America. I know that's not really a hot take. I think this team is going to give Georgia a run for it in the national rankings, the national power and title all year. Jeremiah Smith plays a great game. I mentioned Judkins starting a little bit slow, but you hold Akron to 3 points, you do your job there. Will Howard, the biggest question mark of this entire team, you mentioned there, Mitch. I mean, he's going to be really, if he elevates his game, this is easily a national title favorite. If he kind of hangs around above average QB like we saw from him at Kansas State at times, it's going to be tough, right? It's going to be maybe just a cut above what we saw from McCord last year. But 52-3, you find your stride. Jeremiah Smith finds a stride, which I think is important. You play somebody that young, he's kind of got to get involved in week number one. He certainly does. And yeah, I think that's more week one than anything. A lot of new transfers. I mean, really all across the offense, those guys got to mesh in game, and they get the opportunity to do that. So until they get tested again, I think that's really just week one, working the kinks out. If they continue to start slow, it could arise as a problem. But again, week one, they get the job done, though, either way.
Stay in Big Ten country. You've got 2 big performances from Big Ten quarterbacks. Dylan Raiola taking over at Nebraska, a big win over UTEP. Nebraska Reddit, I saw, was just going bananas over this. They said it was, one comment said it was like caveman discovering fire, Nebraska fans discovering a quarterback that can throw a competent ball. And then Oregon, Dylan Gabriel makes his debut for the Ducks, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns, but the Ducks only win by 10 over the Idaho Vandals, 24-14, I believe was the final score. What stuck out from you in those 2 games?
Raiola, great player. Again, it is unbelievable to me that, I'm right around Raiola's age. Those are guys my age out here dominating at the college level. Whether it's UTEP, it doesn't really matter. That's a Division I team. Raiola's 18 years old, coming in, true freshman, brand new scene. He comes in there and plays really well, right? It's UTEP. You don't want to overwork it, but I think Raiola's in a great spot. Gabriel, really weird. I saw that he hurt his hand at some point in the game on the back of an Idaho Vandal helmet. But either way, not a good showing from them. 10 points is certainly not a great sign. I'm a huge Dan Lanning supporter, though. I think he's one of the better coaches in the country. And hopefully they're able to bounce back, because I think Oregon, Ohio State is going to be a theme we see throughout the season if those two can kind of keep it up. And 10 points, not convincing. And wish it was played in the Kibbie Dome, because, that's kind of where it's at. But instead, Oregon, barely escapes out there. Hopefully that's similar to Ohio State, where it's just week one flaws, work it out. But, new conference, it's going to be time to step up if you're Oregon here soon.
Yeah, I got to find ways to finish drives. That's been a little bit of a theme throughout Dan Lanning's tenure at Oregon. Gets over aggressive, doesn't finish those drives. I'm sure they'll clean it up. Michigan looked terrible on offense early. Alex Orji does not win the job at quarterback. Donovan Edwards didn't do anything special tonight for the majority of the game. Michigan has Texas coming up next week. They win 30-10 over Fresno State without Jeff Tedford, obviously, at head coach. Will Johnson gets a pick 6 to kind of seal it late. But the Wolverines maybe not passing the eye test in this tune-up ahead of the Longhorns next week.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, just from a few people kind of inside of Michigan, just said Alex Orji looked overwhelmed in practice this week. And the defense just kind of got to him, right? Fresno State obviously got to Warren. I don't know how much difference it would have been with Orji out there, but it looked similar to Klubnik. It looked similar to Wiegman, where it's more understandable, kind of a walk-on guy. It's kind of his first start for the defending national champion. Pressure's on. You're playing in the big house. But at the end of the day, this really kind of packed up tight all game. Didn't really get that same feeling from Michigan. I know that's kind of a gimme with all the turnover they had to the NFL draft, but just not a smash mouth team like they were. I mean, it was like I was one of my buddies is a Michigan fan, and at points in the game, it's 3rd and 4, and we're running bubble screens. I've never seen us do that, right? And just looked a little bit different. So first career start from Warren. I don't have a whole lot of confidence with them heading into week number 2 against a Texas team who's a well-oiled machine at this point. It's nothing really against Michigan talent-wise or anything like that. It's just you got a well-oiled machine who made the playoff last year, didn't really lose a whole lot when it comes to just big names, key players. Michigan overturned their entire roster. So it's going to be a test. It's going to be an uphill battle, even though it's in the big house. Just did not look good. Interested to see if we see Warren again, if we see Alex Orji heading into week 2 against the Longhorns. But they survived tonight. It's going to be brutal against Texas in week 2 if they can't get something going.
Yeah. All right, I'll give you 30 seconds on your team here. You have Nico take over at quarterback, 314 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 69-3 win over Chattanooga. Iamaleava, what did you like from him today?
Yeah, he looked good. I mean, really the first pass he threw tonight, really poised in the pocket. Like he just stood in there like nothing was really coming at him. We saw it against Iowa last year as well. And he just looks poised for a redshirt freshman. And that's a really good sign. At times, Joe Milton looked frantic, firing the ball 100 miles an hour over the middle. He looked poised. He looked good. Defense made some plays, blocked a punt at the end, which kind of sealed it. And, same Michigan buddy I was texting with, good teams beat bad teams by a lot in week number 1 and leave no doubt, right? You see Ole Miss absolutely murdered Furman. Last year, I think Michigan destroyed somebody as well. So it just gives you confidence. I know it's Chattanooga, but, you beat a team by 66 points. You feel pretty good about where you are. So good start from Nico. Obviously only plays a half, and he looked good. No doubt about it. Excited.
Yeah, Tennessee, I think, is for real this season. I'm excited to see that defense continue to take the next step forward against big-time competition. And, yeah, Iamaleava, star in the making, man. He's got all the tools and talents to be the next great quarterback to come out of college football. So excited to watch him throughout this season. Iowa scores 40 points. They did it against an FCS opponent, albeit, but hey, Iowa scored 40 points. I saw today that they threw as many touchdowns to wide receivers as they had in the past 2 years combined. Tim Lester might be a miracle worker up there in New
Unreal. Yeah, no, Cade McNamara, I think they were kind of sputtering out of the gate. It was like 3-0 kind of as we got into the second quarter type of thing, but they finally ran away with it. I saw something on Twitter, and it was like, Iowa football is so back, and it was like Illinois State punt, Iowa punt, interception, fumble, punt. It was just a rough start to the game. Obviously, head coach is out. Coach Ferentz doesn't coach week 1. They go in there, handle business 40-0. So that is actually an unbelievable stat. That's crazy.
Well, and at least 2, I don't know if he ended up catching a third, but at least 2 of the touchdowns went to the only true freshman on the 2 deep. Most talented wide receiver on that team. So yeah, all kinds of really fun storylines from the Hawkeyes today, and not Des Moines. My wife and her family would kill me. They're Iowa City, not Des Moines. So I'll make sure I correct that. UNLV, final team on my run sheet. They crush Houston tonight. Matthew Sluka, the Crusader, comes over from Holy Cross. I tweeted out before that game went live. Let's ride the Crusader to Covertown. UNLV was a 2.5-point dog on the road. That was free money, Drew. I locked that one up. I was very happy to get Candy from UNLV, who's maybe one of the best G5 teams in the country. Houston obviously going through a rebuild. Tell you what, man, keep your eye on the Rebels, them and the Boise State Broncos out in the Mountain West. Everyone's going to have to zero in on their regular season contest later on this season.
Yeah, I mean, I am a big Willie Fritz fan. I mean, basically every job that opened up while Willie Fritz was still at Tulane, I thought he was pretty much a head candidate for.
Yep.
Looked his team looked awful tonight, right? Donovan Smith starts at QB, outplayed by Sluka all night. A guy who came from Holy Cross just lit up FCS scoreboards, and comes into UNLV and does the same, just blows Houston out, and is kind of unbelievable. I mean, to see a group of 5 team just really run Houston out of the building is crazy to me. And I think UNLV might have Kansas on the schedule as well, at some point in the out of conference, which could be an interesting game. So yeah, Matthew Sluka comes in, slings the ball around a little bit, and a great game from UNLV. I mean, that is a huge tone-setting week 1 win. If you're the coaching staff, if you're the players over there, you love that. You kind of set the tone and get things going. But yeah, big win for UNLV.
Looking just through live scores here as we put a wrap on this. Really, the 2 things that are standing out in, well, rip the old Pac-12 conference. Arizona, 21st in the country. They've allowed 24 to New Mexico. It's a little bit of a shootout in Tucson. It's 41-24 as we record this right now. I believe Tetroa McMillan is putting on a show. Noah Fafita's thrown for over 300 yards. Yeah, McMillan, 7 catches, 248 yards, and 4 touchdowns. We did a fantasy draft show, I guess a month ago now, with Moose from Walk On Red Shirts. I took Tetroa McMillan as my first wide receiver. I said he might be the best wide receiver in the country over Luther Burden. Love how he's making me look tonight. And then Arizona State, absolutely lowering the wood to Wyoming. I picked Wyoming to win this game outright. That's not happening. It's 41-0 Sun Devils.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I mean, I picked it to be a close game. I think 3-point win is kind of the wave I rode coming into this week for Arizona State. I'm a huge Kenny Dillingham fan. I love what he's doing in Tempe. Sam Leavitt, the Michigan State transfer, 190 yards, pretty good efficiency and a touchdown. Yeah, they're going crazy on Wyoming. As you said, 41-0 into the third quarter. So when I checked, I think Trey had kind of just joined, and I had checked Arizona, New Mexico is 27-24. At one point. So got a little close there. But yeah, Arizona and Arizona State, 2 new Big 12 teams. I was about to say Pac-12, but new Big 12 teams, and they're both leading, both at 41 points too.
That's amazing. Well, Drew, we appreciate you hopping on tonight, doing the live show with us. Been a blast talking ball with you here. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter. My personal account with play-by-play clips, stuff from the podcast, things like that. That's at @DrewHull_sports. The podcast that I run is called Third and Goal. Make sure to go check it out over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And that's at Third and Goal pod, all lowercase, all spelled out, on the socials. So yeah, make sure to go check that stuff out. And yeah, Mitch, appreciate you having me on. Always good to fill in for somebody up here. And I love talking ball into the night. So it was a good time.
That's right. Good time as always, Drew. We loved having you on. We'll do this again. And for everyone watching at home, we appreciate you hanging out with us late on a Saturday night. Of course, thankfully, with week 1, college football is not over. We've got LSU and USC on Sunday night. We've got Boston College, Florida State on Monday night. Do you have picks on both of those games?
Yeah, I personally am going with USC over LSU. I think that's a super fun game, but I would go with USC. Miller Moss looked really good. I think if they get in a shootout, they're going to be able to pull that one out. Florida State, I think, bounces back. Going to be close, but I think they bounce back, get the better of Bill O'Brien and the Boston College Eagles. So Florida State, USC is who I'm running with.
Awesome. There you go. Well, for Drew Hull and Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Until next time, everyone. So long, everybody.
Gracious him. How